Today's episode of the Logbook of a Simple Lindworm Traveler is brought to you by A Touch of Tinge podcast. Whatever your daily ritual, do it with a touch of tinge. Bunchkawow! Greetings to you all fellow travelers. This is Grotnip, welcoming you all back to the Logbook of a Simple Lindworm Traveler. In today's special episode, I'm going to be taking a look at the different Northern Tribes units and trying to somewhat evaluate them 1 year into our Warcrow journey. This is a special episode because it's being produced to you in collaboration with A Touch of Tinge podcast. So, what on earth is all this about? Let's go back to the beginning, shall we? I've been listening to A Touch of Tinge podcasts from the very beginning. Theirs is a scheduled Warcrow themed podcast that provides important content from the community building standpoint, since the pickings in this regard have been quite slim and they do amazing work at what they do. I love how they are able to approach the game via their podcast also in versatile and interesting ways, and their fun and their enjoyment is really amazing to follow along, and it really gets me excited also. So a big like from me, and I hope all of you go and listen to them also. Where I come in is with their episode 8 part 2, where they were talking about the Northern Tribes faction, discussing all the units, and there was even a shout out for me included. Thanks for that, guys. What the crew ended up doing was that they gave a tier list rating for each of the units that they were discussing, and I found this to be a really cool and nice way of them getting the discussion going, and that allowed all of the crew to make their own points and then come together in some type of conclusion in the end. I have personally been staying away from making any type of gradings or tier lists because I feel that they can be more trouble than they are worth. Firstly, setting up a functioning set of criteria for evaluation can be really difficult to get right from the get-go, and even more difficult to follow as you go along, as things like preferences, emotions and experiences are going to affect the end result in a way that might not be a problem in some other circles. Also, I very much feel that I am not an authority that can say this unit good, this unit bad, listen to me you all, so that's a second important reason. But this podcast by A Touch of Tinge was such an excellent opportunity for me to stand on the shoulders of giants that I just couldn't let it pass me by. So I bit the bullet and contacted the podcast crew and asked for their permission to use their podcast rating as a beginning point for my own video, and this way I could offer my humble opinions on some of the stuff, and we could get some cross-media discussion going. And A Touch of Tinge crew were really gracious enough to accept, and we had some nice messages changed between us afterwards. So what we are going to be doing today is we are going to be using the podcast crew's ratings as a beginning point. Then I'm going to give my 2 cents on each of the units covered, and then I'm going to be either leaving them in the same position on the grading, or I'm going to be shifting them up or down a notch. I'm not going to be grading units inside a single position of the ladder, so 8 tier units are all more or less equal. I'm not going to be putting them this is better than this because that's not something that the guys at A Touch of Tinge did, and that's not something I am equipped to do either. But hey, I think it's going to be fun either way. But for this exercise to work, you absolutely need to go and listen to A Touch of Tinge episode 8 part 2. And while you're at it, listen to all their other stuff too, it's great. I'm in no hurry, I can wait. So just pause the video and do that. I have, if I remembered, put the link in the description of this video, and if I haven't or the link doesn't work, simply type A Touch of Tinge podcast to your search engine of choice and you should be able to get there. Leave the guys a great rating and interact with them in other ways also. Let them know that they are doing important work for us all. No cheating at the back of the class. Please go and listen to the episode now and then circle back to here. I'll be waiting. And 1 and 2 and 3 and that's it. Welcome back. One last thing before we proceed forward. When the podcast was recorded, the guys were living in the update 1.5 world, but since then there have been some small changes in the 1.5.1 update, and some additional FAQ entries have been released to us, so we'll be taking those into account while we move forward with this piece. Let's go. Here is a visual representation of the tier list that A Touch of Tinge was able to produce to us in audio form. The icons are in the same order as they appear in the podcast, but I have slotted them to the different rankings from S through to C. There are no D tier units, as you can see. And I will be going next through these units from top to bottom, left to right, and then I will be giving my own personal assessment, talking about why I feel same or different about the unit as was told to us in the podcast, and then we will see how my own ranking would be different or the same when compared to A Touch of Tinges. And now with the magic of editing, I have taken out all the color from the pictures, and as we move along I'm going to return color to the units that we are talking about, and then I'm going to exchange the color of the circle around them to show you whether I have kept the unit in its grading from the podcast or whether I have lowered or raised them up a notch or two. Let's do this. The first unit for me to discuss, and the only one that got the S tier label from the crew of A Touch of Tinge, is the Battle Scarred. There's not really much that I can add about this unit. The crew talked about them pretty extensively. They are an amazing unit in and of themselves, and they can be further enhanced by your choice of attached character. Play them, love them, and make your enemy fear them. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. That's an S tier from Grotnip also. Okay, let's start going through the A tier units as per A Touch of Tinge's assessment, and immediately I think we are going to be running into something of a controversy. While I agree with pretty much everything that the podcast crew had to say about the Wise Main, he is an amazing unit attachment and he does bring effects that could otherwise be found on a character twice his points value, and thus I do agree that under most circumstances he is amazing bang for your buck. But there is one crucial thing that sets him apart from most of our unit attachments, and that is the fact that he is indeed a support unit. And my gripe with him being a support unit, it is not so much about the fact that he doesn't count as one of the members of the unit when it comes to determining their combat effectiveness. There are ways around that, and there are units that don't really mind all that much dropping to half strength for their effectiveness. But my problem is what happens when the unit is about to go down. And the problem is that as a support character, the Wise Main will get killed in the latest as the second last model of the unit, after which they are entirely gone. But our excellent officer type characters will not suffer such a fate, but rather they will detach from the unit and continue the fight on their own if the unit gets killed around them. Yes, in many cases this is going to mean that the character will now have to test to see if they break due to being over stress, and they might even do so if they are 2 or more over stress. But the character as a unit still remains. You can recuperate them and return them to the battle, and the Northern Tribes characters tend to be extremely high value even as solo. They pack some impressive abilities, some nice switches, they have excellent offensive outputs, and they aren't all that easy to take out either, thanks to having decent defense rolls and a lot of wounds. And Wisemane misses out on all of this due to the fact that he gets killed along with the unit, which is pretty sad. And for this reason, I'm going to be so heartless as to relegate our venerable Wisemane to the beat here. Let the comments flow in. The next unit to talk about is the Varrank Ice Archers. This is one of those moments where the point of time for the recording of the episode of A Touch of Tinge and what I'm doing comes into a sharp focus. Because when the podcast was being recorded, we were still living in the original 1.5 update world where characters could not be shot by enemy ranged attacks if they were within 5 strides of a friendly unit essentially. But this restriction has since been lifted, and that means that the ice archers are more powerful than they were a couple of weeks ago. I was actually originally considering dropping the ice archers to beat here with the original 1.5 rules update in mind, but now I think that they are solidly back into the A tier from my point of view also. Very much all of the reasoning that the podcasters gave is what I would also argue. If you want to reach out and touch something in a Northern Tribes force, the Ice Archers are one of your few options for doing that, and they are also the only unit based way of incorporating ranged attacks into your company. And what this means, as was expertly discussed on the podcast, is that they can be used as backline guards or even last ditch objective grabbers, since they do have that single point of conquest on their full profile, and there are some characters that you can also attach to them to increase this conquest value even further. So not world beaters, but solid at what they do, and for this reason I'm going to be creating also the Ice Archers as an A unit. Next up is Lotta, probably the most famous orc officer out there. This is a character unit attachment essentially that does amazing work for mere 25 points. Lotta adds 3 strides to the charge distance of your unit, meaning that it'll in practice out threat range all non-cavalry enemy units out there under most circumstances, if charging is involved, that is. She can add as much as 5, or when attached to skin changes, 6 points of effective damage to a unit's activation. She adds an automatic block on defense. She's capable of disarming enemies via her switch that she grants to her unit. And not only are these amazing things, but she also grants her unit not only +1 morale, but also the double orange willpower that is quite hard to come by when it comes to the unit attachments of the Northern Tribes. Beyond all this, if and when the unit gets wiped out around Lotta, she will keep fighting as a solo character. Yes, she's not a world beater by herself, but she is sturdy, she's dangerous, and for 25 points I really don't think anyone can ask for more. And as a result, I'm going to be going as far as bumping her up into the S tier. Next up on the units listed as A by a touch of Tinge, my man, the Dark Master. This is a slam dunk of an S tier unit for me. I have used the Dark Master extensively and there is nothing but good things that I can say about this 30-point model. Firstly, he's an excellent scenario play tool. Ambushing to the backline of your opponent to capture undefended objectives can be worth its weight in gold, especially when playing a faction like the Northern Tribes that likes to often exert extreme pressure against the front line of the enemy. These types of backline attacks, whether they be simply capturing objectives and or also assassinating important pieces, can prove quite backbreaking to the opponent. Additionally, despite him not being able to reliably take out the most dangerous of enemies in one go, he's also extremely hard to counter. There are very limited amounts of models in the game and units in the game that can reliably take out a full health Dark Master in one go, thanks to his Coded in Shadows ability. So he's going to be a persistent nuance problem to your opponent once you get him infiltrated behind their lines. I even think that nowadays with the FAQ change on units with Scout being allowed to deploy next to any table edge outside of the enemy deployment zone during the deployment phase, the attached version now also has some legs. If you want to carry a unit of Orc Hunters with you to an advantageous position on the battlefield, you can do that via the attached version of the Dark Master. Sharp Inception is incredible, and I think that's almost worth the point of admission anyway. So the Dark Master, as already stated, is a slam dunk of a S tier model. Next up, I'm going to be doing something a bit different. I'm going to be keeping 3 units in the same position as they are in the A Touch of Tinge ranking, that is Escort the Executioner, the Wark Riders and the Revenant. And the reason I'm doing is the following. I just recently got my Wark Riders and got them assembled, and I don't yet own a Revenant. So all the gaming experience that I have out of these 3 units is basically playing Escort out of the Wolf Riders, or the Wark Riders, sorry. So I don't feel that I have enough experience and competency to create these units in a reliable way. So I'm going to defer to my brethren in the podcast crew, and I will be keeping all of these 3 units where they were slotted in A Touch of Tinge's opinion, and that is in the A tier. Next up is the Prime Warrior. The Prime Warrior is an excellent solo fighter, and she adds some extremely beneficial bonuses, especially to our more high-end units in the form of additional threat range and also additional conquest value, though these buffs are hedging on the unit getting stress, so you can't access them straight from the get-go. The Prime Warrior is also one of the few of the Northern Tribes units that are capable of reducing stress of friendly units and also capable of producing extra activations, even though both of these abilities only can take effect on other Orc units, so that's limiting your options somewhat. My only other problem with the Prime Warrior really is the fact that she wants to fight solo in order to gain access to her best abilities, but at the same time it's rather activation inefficient to run her solo and move her forward into position to get a proper charge off, and she's also susceptible to getting shot while getting into position. The workaround obviously is to attach to her to a unit that will accompany her to the front line and then let her fly out of the unit charging when the situation so calls. But even in this instance, you are still having to face the opportunity cost of not having another officer or maybe a vice main lead the unit that's now left hanging all by itself. These are small nitpicky things. I would dare even say, balancing wise, these are good things because they allow me to agree with a touch of Tinge and keep the Prime Warrior in the A tier. Next in line is our character tattooist Celica. While I once again agree mostly with what the podcast crew were talking about, she's amazing when attached to the Ice Archers and she has some excellent game on her own. There is one thing that I slightly disagree with, and there is one big change that has come out since the podcast was released. The one thing that I don't necessarily entirely agree on is that the way to quote unquote play the Ice Archers or lean into the Ice Archers is by always attaching Celica to them. There are other unit attachments that can work alongside the Ice Archers. None of them obviously make them as competent shots as Celica does, but there are others that can help the Ice Archers in different ways. For example, the Hersir that I'm going to be talking about a bit later. Additionally, I think that the Ice Archers are the type of unit that can even be ran solo and still be worth their price. You do have to remember that Celica more than doubles the unit's price if you choose to combine them in a tactical element. And also, I think that post the most recent update, Celica is also such a valuable piece of fighting on her own that the opportunity cost of getting her to attach her to the Ice Archers is substantial. When the podcast was being recorded, it was still the case that characters that were sitting next to friendly units could not essentially be targeted by ranged attacks, but that restriction is no more. So now Celica is again a terrifying assassin of wounded and or vulnerable targets, as she can pop out of ambush 18 strides away from her target and then let loose with the bow of claws. If you don't have to move during that same activation, you can go full in and use the special ability of the weapon that allows you to not only target your primary target, but pick 2 additional targets to essentially get almost automatically slowed and have a chance of inflicting some chip-in damage as well. What makes Celica's attack so dangerous to her primary target is not only the fact that it inflicts an automatic slow, but also because she's rolling 5 dice, 3 which are yellow, and any hollow successes that she gets will inflict automatic wounds. And as veterans among you know, the yellow dice have 2 hollow successes per dice, so there are quite plenty of potential automatic wounds coming there. And just in my last game I was able to kill Nuada using this very switch ability. Obviously he'd been wounded before, but all the same Celica was able to jump out of ambush, let loose with her bow of claws, and that was all she wrote. Furthermore, what I really appreciate about Celica as a solo piece is the fact that while with the Dark Master you essentially have to choose between scenario play and offensive play when you choose to deploy him, Celica can actually do both. You can comfortably go to an unguarded objective and claim it for your own, and at the same time let loose with your Bone of Claws to inflict damage and or slowed. And this I feel can be truly a breaking event for your opponent. They are being engaged from the front by the strong Northern Tribes forces, and then someone appears behind them, shoots at something important, wounding or potentially even killing it, slows a bunch of units and takes up a valuable objective. That's something that many forces will or could at least struggle to deal with if you play your cards right and choose your time wisely. For these reasons, in the current environment, I'm inclined to raise Celica to S tier. When it comes to Njord the Merciless, I don't think there's much that I can add that a touch of Tinge didn't already say. He's a expensive but very fairly priced character who's capable of being a solo bruiser who can deal out a lot of damage, survive what the enemy can throw at him, and I agree that you could even, for example, in a adventure including the decapitation feat, run him as your leader with no problem. He might also be a good pick for your banner bearer in Defeat the Banner, so that's not half bad. He's also a decent enough addition to many of the units, with how, for example, Berserker Rage and Frightened are so very good at the moment. But even in those instances, you are probably looking for the right moment to detach him from the unit and get his rampage going. So all in all, it's quite easy for me to create Njord the Merciless as an A unit. Next up, Alborg, and here again I have pretty much the same feelings and same reasonings as the podcast crew had when they talked about him. Alborg essentially is the guy to beat when it comes to choosing the high command and or leader for your company. You really do need to have a good reason for not running him. And there are some. If you are looking to run a mixed list, but you are very much set on running Varrank characters with Varrank units and or characters with Orc units, and you are unsure whether you can get the value out of the Warg and the Crow, then it might be not a time to bring him, or in the more likely scenario, you have decided to play more or less only Orcs and then Alborg can stay at home. But in cases where this isn't what's happening, then yeah, usually you want to bring him around for those juicy extra activations. The ability to leverage War Alliance, that is mix and match Orc and Varrank units and characters between each other, and he's also a solid combatant on his own. And for all these reasons, despite his hefty 50-point price tag, I'm also going to be keeping him in the A tier. Okay, next up, the first unit that the podcast crew put into the B tier, and that is the Tattooist. In my personal opinion, the Tattooist is from a list building perspective pretty much the polar opposite of the Wise Main, where I would basically never consider running the Wise Main as a solo piece. I these days don't find myself seriously considering running the Tattooist as a part of a unit, unfortunately. This comes down mostly to the fact that the opportunity cost of including the Tattooist in a unit is simply too steep. She only brings that single point of morale and the healing tattoos ability, which is an ability that I really like the first part of, but the second part is a bit lackluster. Being immune to disarmed, slowed and vulnerable states is pretty great, no question about it, but at the same time the healing part is simply a more unreliable automatic block. Yes, technically there are situations where healing can be better than automatic blocks, but still I don't think it's worth it in many cases. Also, the fact that the Tattooist doesn't bring any conquest to the unit is highly problematic, so that's why I also don't consider her to be a great unit attachment in most cases. But at the same time, I consider her a spectacular single character unit or single piece due to all the facts that the podcast crew talked about: her ability to scout, her ability to heal, her surprisingly decent ability to inflict some damage on weaker units with her ranged attack and so forth. She also has two cool passive skills that can be made use of. One affects friendly spellcasters, so evokers essentially, and the other helps out all your Varrank units by granting them dispel. And the tattooist fulfills an important position in the list building for the Northern Tribes from where I stand, in that she is a model that you can pick when your list that you want to build comes in at 235 points and you only have 15 points to spend. The tattooist is practically never a bad choice in this situation, and now that you can even deploy her on a table edge at the beginning of the table, giving her a even larger an area that she can affect from the get-go, I really like what you get with this model, and for these reasons, despite her lackluster performance as a unit attachment, I'm going to go as far as to raise her to A tier. Next up, we come to my favorite unit, and that is the Orc Hunters. Thanks for A Touch of Tinge podcast shouting me out, especially in relation to this particular unit. I personally consider, without any bias that I'm at least willing to admit, that the Orc Hunters are by far the best basic infantry unit released into the game so far. They have an excellent attack roll, they have a decent enough defensive roll when they are at full strength, they have good charge distance, and they have a good offensive switch that other more valuable units can also make use of, and they have a defensive switch that has the power to be game state altering. That is their ability to switch their blocks for successes when defending against melee attacks effectively, that is. This ability is further enhanced if and when you choose to attach a character that adds an automatic block to the unit, since that means that you have now access to a baseline of a single potential success against any enemies attacking you. And while there are going to be situations where the Orc Hunters simply roll poorly on their defense and get wiped out pretty easily, for Exhibit A, see my last battle report, there are also going to be times when they roll hot and they either take out or at least endanger an elite unit attacking them or a expensive unit attacking them due to the wounds that they can exchange in. And the cool thing is that your opponent cannot know in advance which roll is coming their way. Is it going to be a fizzle and nothing of danger happens, or is it going to be a whole bunch of blocks that kill or maim their valuable pieces? And for a 20-point unit, that's a great bet to make. Just in my last game, it was actually my humble Orc Hunters who rolled hot on their defense, switching a bunch of wounds onto Nuada, leaving him at only one remaining, which meant that Celica could take out the Elven general at her leisure. The Orc Hunters are also, I think, an excellent chassis that you can then customize in the way you like by attaching one of our excellent characters to them. If you're looking for a solid and cheap expendable Alpha Striker, slap Lotta in there, move your asses and let's go. If you want a cheap backline unit that can protect your objectives without breaking the bank, come what may, attach the Wise Main and just leave them there for the time being. Or if you want a unit that will safely escort your Prime Warrior or your Njord to the front line, here are the Orcs for you. So for all these reasons, I think it's quite easy for me to be the one who says that the Orc Hunters most definitely belong in the A tier. Next up is the Contender. I very much recognized myself also when it came to what the podcasters were saying about this piece. I also ran the Contender quite a lot when she was originally released, but since then I have unfortunately seen her squeezed out of most of my lists in favor of other things. And I have only recently come back around to adding her to more and more lists and using her more and more. And I have been enjoying having her around so much that I feel that she is actually going to be quite a solid piece of my lists going forward. Beyond the standard orc officer stuff, that is excellent performance enhancements and the potential to fight on as a powerful solo character, what the contender brings to the table are her two special abilities. The Defiant Leader not only provides additional damage and also can shut down enemies trying to leverage their defensive modifiers thanks to the now enhanced vulnerable state, but it also is a rare way for the northern tribes to access movement tricks in their lists, at least when it comes to moving around enemy pieces. Just recently I was able to defuse a dangerous situation, including a unit of Black Legion, Black Angels and the attached Hetman due to leveraging this ability to pull the Black Angels out of position, forcing them to charge my contender led battle scarred, which eventually led to the destruction of the hegemony cavalry. The second big thing about the contender is her Orc Commander, which allows a momentary boost to the conquest value of the Northern Tribes units that inflict damage within 15 strides of the contender. The more and more I play Warcrow, the more and more I come to realize that being good at one thing is not usually going to be enough for many of the lists. Yes, I like to build and field Northern Tribes lists that can out-attrition, out-aggression the opponent, but that doesn't win me the day if the enemy is able to leverage, for example, way more effective scenario play elements against me. And this is a part where I feel that the contender can help out a lot with. If I'm charging my unit of Orc Hunters or Warc Riders or Battle Scarred into something that's holding on an objective, dealing damage is going to be great, but what would also be even better would be if I was able to switch the objective under my control during this attack, and the contender can facilitate this. And by getting to kill two birds with one stone, this can be one big and important 25-point investment. So for all these reasons, I'm willing to go as far as to elevate the contender to the A tier. Next up is the Evoker. I agree mostly with what the podcast crew were talking about. If you want a spellcaster in the Northern Tribes, this is it. Take it or leave it. And as a support caster, the Evoker isn't all that bad. Her Spirit of Thermopleurus spell can be highly impactful, and we have especially recently seen several pieces that can interact with this ability extremely well. For example, running Warc Riders with Escort attached, that can be a dangerous combo when the Spirit is in play, or just a solo mounted Wise Main, thanks to the combination of high speed, Spirit of Thermopleurus, and then access to the Frightened state via the Wrath Roar. At the same time, the Summon the Rock spell is extremely weak, I find, and now that characters are again fair game even when they are standing next to units, the pitiful survivability of the Evoker is going to pose a problem. But at the same time, if and when you are willing to field her as a part of a largely orcish force, where she is going to be hanging back, blocking enemy spells, maybe casting Spirit of Thermopleurus, and then using her Delegate of the Ancestors to rally fleeing orc units when necessary, I think that's a job you can do perfectly well without exposing her to enemy fire. So for these reasons, While I'm not going to be dropping her into a C tier, I'm most definitely not going to be raising her up to A tier, so I'm going to agree with a touch of Tinge and leave her solidly in the B tier. Next up, the Hersir. I really salute the fact that when it came the time to talk about the Hersir, the podcast crew were very forward about the fact that they don't have all that much experience playing this piece. I think when you don't have all that much experience with something, it's very good that you be upfront about this stuff. I have tried doing so when talking about Escort, Warcriders, and the Revenant, for example, in this video. It doesn't mean that one can't have opinions and can't talk about it, but it helps put things in perspective for other people also. I have played a huge amount of Hersir. He's my absolute favorite Varang character, and I run him in most of my lists involving any Varang pieces. I have even sometimes attached him to a unit of Orc Hunters in a War Alliance list. And why I love him so is that firstly, he is an excellent unit attachment. For 25 points you get an officer that grants some excellent offensive switches. The defensive side is a bit lacking, but hey, you can't have everything. He grants the unit the Berserker Rage via probably the coolest named ability in the game, to die killing. And also he grants the unit the command skill not one step back, which means that the unit in question should never break under normal circumstances as long as you have command tokens to spend. But this is all very much what's known to people about the Hersir. But what I think goes a little bit under the radar is the fact that since the 1.5 update, his excellent solo performance as a one-shot or two-shot weapon as a solo model now is more easy to access. And let me explain. The Hersir has access as a solo model to a passive ability called the Tattoo of Sturkriege, which upgrades his Berserker Rage into a version that provides you with two symbols of your choice when you are taking a wound as per the Berserker Rage ability. And this means that I have found the Hersir to be quite a decent countercharge weapon when attached, for example, into the Ice Archers. An enemy unit comes in sniffing around the Ice Archers thinking that they can engage the Varang missile infantry or push them back, but then the Hersir comes flying out of the unit charging them. And if you can access the Tattoo of Sturkriege, that is, you have not yet taken 2 wounds on the Hersir, he starts at 3 successes immediately upon attacking. Obviously you could exchange one of those successes for a disarmed infliction if you so choose, but hey, let's talk raw damage here simply. If you can push for additional performance, that's 4 successes before you roll any dice, and that's quite an oomph coming out of a 25-point unit attachment model that's primarily used to empower a unit, not fight as a solo piece. So if my opponents would be so kind as to stop leaving my Hersir alive at 1 wound, I would really appreciate it so that I could access this great ability more. What makes the Hersir even more dangerous in this capacity is the fact that, let's say you charge out of your unit to engage something, you apply the Tattoo of Sturkriege and hit them as hard as you can. Now the enemy has the problem that if you still have 2 wounds remaining on your Hersir, which you should unless you took any while engaging them in the first place. You still have access to the Tattoo of Sturkriege, so you get to hit them again if they choose to try and hit you back, or you can even use that ability to exchange a single wound for 2 blocks on the defense. So this is a really cool and really excellent model for such a cheap point cost, and for these reasons I feel really happy to be moving him to the A tier. Next up, the Tundra Marauders. I mostly agree yet again with what the podcast crew were talking about. This is an excellent scout unit that has incredible mobility thanks to being able to combine excellent movement score and the snow leopard tattoo ability. And as already stated, they are one of the few units that can execute double attacks in the post update 1.5 world. Yes, their damage ceiling is quite low, and yes, they absolutely need a unit attachment to be worth their salt as a melee infantry unit of opportunity, I might say. Stay away from extremely hard defense targets unless you are simply looking to tie them down, but against anything that's even medium or lighter in its defensive capabilities, the Tundra Marauders with the proper unit attachment can do quite a number on. They are also nice and slippery on the defense thanks to the fact that they can disengage with a quite reliable A switch, which means that they can avoid being pushed back, which can essentially complicate your opponent's job of, for example, pushing them away from objectives if that's something that they're looking for. The Tundra Marauders also got better, I feel, with the recent FAQ, since now you can scout deploy them at the beginning of the battle to a table edge, and this means that if you dare and or if your opponent gives you the chance, there is nothing stopping you from aggressively deploying the skirmishers quite close to, if not downright next to, your opponent's deployment zone, ready to ravage their backline support units, missile infantry, and stuff like this. My only bigger gripe with this unit is the fact that while caltrops are cool and ability, the fact that all cavalry units that we have access to at the moment have the preferred terrain rugged means that they aren't as useful against cavalry as the backstory would have you believe. But all in all, with fantastic mobility, decent enough price, scout keyword, double attacks, I'm going to be moving the Tundra Marauders next to their most frequently used unit attachment, at least in my games, Hersir in the A tier. Next up, the Wrathmane. I'm going to come out of the gate and say that I agree with the assessment of A Touch of Tinge that this is a solid B tier character. I have been running the Wrathmane extensively and I really appreciate what he brings to the table. He's not bringing stuff like War Alliance, unbeatable combat prowess, or the Wark and the Crow, but he is a powerful combatant in and of himself. He slots extremely well in the Orc Hunters, and he provides your company with 2 command tokens, and I think that that's actually the cheapest price for command tokens in the Northern Tribes at the moment, getting essentially 15 points per command token. He does eat up a high command slot, so there is competition for that, and I have been running successful lists entirely without a high command, but at the same time there always has to be more or less a reason for me not to bring the Wrathmane if I don't have another high command character picked, since his suite of abilities is extremely good as is. So I concur, the Wrathmane is a solid B of a choice for the Northern Tribes. Okay, let's delve into the animal pen and start talking about the C tier units, and first up are the skin changers. The skin changers for me for the longest time were obviously also a C tier unit. They are quite expensive for what they do, and when things start to go wrong for them, they go wrong really fast and the unit gets wiped out quite quick. I was always struggling with the fact that I am paying so much for this unit and then I have to sacrifice essentially an activation for them to drop in from scouting and then getting into a position from maybe which they can then affect the game state, or I had to choose the polar bear totem and lumber them from my deployment zone towards the enemy in a predictable and activation intensive a way. But that was before the recent FAQ, and I feel that the answer to, or I would even argue it's a change to how Scout works, has impacted this unit the most. Because if and when you choose the Arctic Fox totem for your skin changes, they gain the scout keyword, and that allows you to deploy them on the battlefield from the get-go, but adjacent to any of the table edges. And this bypasses both the trouble of having to advance your polar bear totemed skin changers from your deployment zone, and also it means that enemies wandering nearby are going to get immediately charged. You don't have to come in via scouting and then position and then threaten enemies with charges. So I could see a world where, for example, if I'm rocking a War Alliance list, I drop in the skin changers with Lotta to a threatening position and then just leave them there for the time being. Then it becomes the enemy's problem to come close to them and accept a terrifically destructive charge from them, or find another way of dealing with them. But I don't have to invest the resources into developing their position any further. They can be useful from the very get-go, and that's something that gets me really excited. And that's something that means that I'm actually going to be playing the skin changers a whole lot more going forward. And for these reasons, I cannot justify leaving them in the seat here. So the Arctic Fox totem is going to be pulling this unit into the B tier. And the last unit waiting for my opinion on the grading is going to be Alvard Ice Bear. Once again, I'm afraid I have to agree with a touch of Tinge's assessment. Alvard is not a bad piece, but he is overpriced for what he does. The main competition I feel with this model is with Alborg, and the problem is that Alborg is 10 points cheaper. He provides you with an additional command token for that important initiative role. He has a force-wide powerful command ability in the Warg and the Crow, and he also brings the War Alliance. While Alvard can, under the right circumstances, take out most of the enemy force by himself, he can also go down if your opponent knows how to counter him and or you get somewhat unlucky. And the ways that you can leverage him are sadly quite limited. It's essentially running solo and taking up most of your company's activations, or it's attached to a subbar unit in the polar bear totemed skin changers. So for these reasons, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave Alvard in the seat here. But hey, don't take this as discouragement. Take this as a challenge to make him work, and let me know how you did it, and what were you able to achieve with this Varank leader. Phew, and with that, the tier list is more or less complete. As you can see, most of the units are circled in green, so I agreed in the end with most of the picks from a touch of Tinge. There are quite a few units that I actually raised a single tier upwards, some due to my preferences, some might say because of the fact that I am a Northern Tribes fanboy, and partially due to the changes brought about in the most latest update. I also rather scandalously dropped down a single unit, and let's see if this gets any discussion going here or over at a touch of Tinge. All in all, as you can see from this listing, I feel that the Northern Tribes 1 year in are in an amazing place. Most of the units are in the S or A tiers, and there are only a single unit in C tier and no D tier units to be seen. Obviously, we all do need to remember that there is no strong scientific criteria behind this grading, and this is just based on the feels as of right now. But you are here for the enjoyment, not for the hard facts, I hope. At this point, there is little else for me to say, but safe travels, fellow travelers. Hope to see you again soon. And one last time, a huge thank you to A Touch of Tinge. Keep up the good work, guys.